All right, for more now, we are joined by Chairperson of Zimbabwe Anti-Sanctions Movement, Rutendo Matinyarare. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. First, let's get your reaction to this move by the US to firstly terminate the existing sanctions regime against Zimbabwe. But while sanctioning Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa and his wife and senior government officials for their alleged involvement in what they say is corruption and human rights abuses. Your take?
Thank you so much. And I initially thought that you had mischaracterized what had happened, which is the removal of executive order sanctions, which constitute about 93% or 99% of the Zimbabwean sanctions being removed, and 100% of sanctions on the Zimbabwean people, the government of Zimbabwe, and its parastatals and companies being removed. We are absolutely ecstatic about that, because we believe that we played a very big role with the court case that we were having here in South Africa, where we actually had Joe Biden answering to our papers, and we were going to challenge his application for immunity to DIRCO and ask him to answer to the illegal sanctions that he's got on Zimbabwe, that he forces South African companies to implement. The fact that those sanctions have been removed is a very great thing. And when we look at these new sets of sanctions, the Magnitsky Act, we believe that this was just a way for the Americans to save face. They have instituted sanctions on Zimbabwe for 23 years, sanctions that were actually impacting civilians, and now they've removed them, and we believe that they were coerced to remove them. But just as a superpower, they couldn't just remove the sanctions. They had to maintain the facade of dealing with human rights violations, or at least what they allege are human rights violations. But what we are all asking is, we've got a lady called Sandra Mpunga, one of the billionairesses of Zimbabwe, a black woman, built a business with her husband to become the biggest fuel supplier in Zimbabwe. They've also got a number of other businesses and shareholdings in banks. How is it that they could be abusing human rights for them to be on those sanctions lists? We've got people like Obey Chimuka, another business person who owns one of the biggest cement manufacturers in the country. The question is, how does he abuse human rights by being a successful business person? And so is Kudata Gray. And I'm not suggesting that the government officials that are on the list have violated human rights, but the question is, since when are allegations used to punish people and to take away their rights to trade and move on the basis of allegations without giving them an opportunity to answer for themselves in a court of law before punishing them? So this judicial punishment through these sanctions is still unfair, but we do celebrate the fact that the United States has removed 99% of the sanctions that were impacting Zimbabwean lives, and maybe now Zimbabwe can begin to grow.
And in fact, just on your comment about, the US's way of saving face, the US Deputy Treasury General saying that, or Treasury Secretary Wally Adeyemo actually saying that, the changes they are making are intended to show what has always been clear as truth, and that is to say that the sanctions were never meant or never intended to target the people of Zimbabwe and individuals, as you've rightfully mentioned, but only to target a select few. Do you find that to be the truth?
It's disingenuous, because they've punished the Zimbabwean people for 23 years. And it is only after we started taking legal action, it is after we went to the United Nations and began to threaten to go to the International Court of Justice for crimes against humanity that were being perpetuated by illegal sanctions that were collectively punishing the Zimbabwean people, persecuting the Zimbabwean people, and have actually killed in excess of 1 million people in the last 23 years. We've got women who are dying giving birth. We've got children that are dying without getting to the age of 5 years of age because of these illegal sanctions that were imposed on a government to stop it from giving healthcare, education, and basic services to its people. So it has never been about human rights. Plus, their own Universal Declaration of Human Rights and human rights laws, they say that people must be tried before they're punished. People must be given an opportunity to appear in front of a court of their peers, and they should have an opportunity to answer and defend themselves to allegations. Now, right now, these people that have remained on the sanctions, the 10 people on the Magnitsky Act, are being punished for human rights violations and corruption that has never been proved in any court of law, has never been tested in any court of law, and that extrajudicial punishment is a contravention of human rights and the very same laws created by the United States through the UN and through its human rights organizations. So it is disingenuous, and the fact that an African is the one being used to convey this kind of a lie and also to advance American hegemony is quite unfortunate.
Now, your organization was created, with the very objective of combating what you call Western imperialism. I mean, by promoting African unity, etc. Are you then hopeful, that this latest development that will see other countries, soon following suit, and of course these sanctions and restrictions being lifted by the US?
Look, my biggest fear is that the removal of these sanctions actually portends to a bigger problem and a shift in the geopolitical power of Southern Africa. We suspect that, yes, our pressure that we have given the American government was very instrumental in removing these sanctions, but we also feel that they want to target South Africa with sanctions if by any way the ANC was to actually win in the next coming elections. And if the ANC wins in the next coming elections, we believe that there will be punishment upon the ANC for standing with Palestine and taking the Israel to the International Court of Justice. We believe that the position of South Africa on Zimbabwe and the position of South Africa on Russia and Cuba will also be used to punish it with economic sanctions. So we feel that the Americans know that once they punish South Africa, then they lose their support of very powerful countries within SADC. And we believe that they are realigning to make Zimbabwe a leader in SADC or a hub in SADC, so that when they do impose sanctions on South Africa, they still have a friend in the region. And what we are warning our government to say is that when this happens and capital wants to come to Zimbabwe, investors from South Africa, white capital wants to come to Zimbabwe, we expect our government to be circumspect of understanding imperialism and how it is being utilized through private capital, and make sure that they do not realign with the Western trajectory that could put us at loggerheads with countries like South Africa and actually become beneficiaries of the isolation of South Africa through economic sanctions. I believe that in this region, we need to stand together, South Africa, Zimbabwe, irrespective of the benefits that Zimbabwe might be offered by coming investment. We must continue to stand together to fight imperialism, because this imperialism is the problem in the region. And we need to also turn countries like Zambia that seem to have given in to this Western imperialism and have become a conduit for allowing AFRICOM and the placement of American special forces and soldiers on SADC soil. We don't need that. We need peace in this region.
All right, Rutendo, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Of course, we could talk and go on forever in as far as this conversation is concerned, but unfortunately we have run out of time. That was, of course, the chairperson of Zimbabwe Anti-Sanctions Movement, Rutendo Matinyarare.